Hi, everybody. This is Suzanne Spooner, and this is Your Superior Self.
I am so delighted to have you on this show, Suzanne. Why don't you give everyone your credentials? What level 3 practitioner are you?
So, I am a level 3 practitioner of Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique, and that was the hypnosis technique developed by the late, amazing Dolores Cannon. I've been doing this for 10 years now, and oh my gosh, I'm blessed. It's one of the best ways to show people that they hold all their answers within, they can heal themselves, take them on amazing, magical, mystical journeys through their soul's history, and find the answers to all their questions. It's a pretty
Mhm.
good little gig.
I'd say so. You used to be in real estate, right?
I did, yeah, I've done a few different things. Yes, I did real estate for that was my last great tap into being normal, I guess, and was a cosmetologist for 20 years. So I'm used to sitting around and talking to people, and
Mhm.
um, it helps with this job because we do a lot of talking and helping them to find exactly what they need to in order to solve their life issues.
Sure. Well, I feel like real estate has been really lucrative since the pandemic, right? Would you ever give this up to go back to that?
Never, 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 never. I remember, matter of fact, I remember I had a really great real estate manager. I really just love him a lot. And I remember sitting down with him and saying, okay, I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to do hypnosis. And he's like, what? What? You're like, no, you can't do that. That won't ever work. I'm like, well, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to see how it goes. And never have looked back. I've never wanted to do anything else at all. This is the most amazing empowering job to help people find their answers.
Well, did you already have like something to fall back on, like clients, like a practice, or did you, I mean, what did that look like? That kind of is that is a leap of faith, right? Like that could be scary to do that.
No, it wasn't though. I mean, I just felt like it was the right thing to do. No, I didn't. Other than my own other spiritual work that I had been doing for a few years before I found Dolores, and that was teaching people how to channel. I call it the art of universal knowing, or the acronym is TAUK, so talk. So that was going for a while, and that was fine. That was, again, it was showing people that they have all the answers within them, which I just love. I think that's the best way to enlighten yourself.
Mhm.
And so no, I had already let go of the real estate and just dove headfirst into QHHT, and then had both kind of balls spinning at the same time. And that's how it's been for the last 10 years.
Wow, fascinating. Your husband, I think he's an engineer, right?
Yes.
So he's
Yeah.
very left brain, very
Yeah.
analytical.
He is an enigma. I love him with all my heart. I can't quite to this day put my finger on exactly what he is, how far he can go with this. He doesn't seem overly interested in what I do, but he's incredibly supportive of it. And when I least expect it, he'll throw something out that just like totally resonates with what I do. And I'll be like, who told you to say that? So I think he's kind of a closet woo-woo guy. Um, but
That's fascinating.
it
Because
gets it more.
it's interesting, right? Because people who are into past life regressions, you call everyone else normal, right? But I feel like you guys are in on the secret. Like I feel like you guys are in on the truth. We're just kind of asleep.
I think it's like this. I feel for all the information that I've accumulated over 10 years of sessions and work in the field of channeling all this time, I feel like I know very little. I think I'm always learning. And so for every client that comes in that has a session, I learn so much from them. And I'm so grateful to have that opportunity and expand my own sense of knowing and awareness.
Hmm. So when you garner that support, when you gather that information, that data, what are you tapping into with that patient or client to receive that?
Yeah, so it would be a client because we're not medical, but it's unique to every single client. The client doesn't know where they're going to go or what information is going to come through when they come in. I don't either. We can have some ideas, but it's generally not that. So what happens is well, let me back up and tell you kind of how we really
Sure.
begin. So before they come to me for a session or another practitioner, they'll write up a list of questions that they want answers to. And they tend to be two lists, one of health and body questions, one of life and personal questions. And they bring that list with them all prepared to the session. We sit and talk for a while. This can take a couple of hours. And they are sharing with me a bit about their life story, the things that have happened to them that have shaped them one way or another. I'm giving them the information they need to help themselves to let go and allow and just have this amazing experience. And when we get done with that talk, then they get comfortable on my massage table, and I start guiding them into this nice deep state of relaxation or hypnosis. They're the same thing. And from there, they typically are going to go to another lifetime. And the most amazing part of that is nothing is random. So there's a part of us that knows everything, that is always helping to guide us. It is sometimes called the subconscious or the high self, divine self, superconscious, whatever name we want to put to that. And that's the part of us that knows everything about us, our soul, not just this lifetime, but every lifetime. If that's your belief system, we can go that way first. So that part of you that knows everything, we'll call it the high self, will purposefully pick the lifetime or lifetimes that the client needs to see to show them things that help them in their current life. So that's why we just don't know where they're going to go. That's kind of the high self's job to pick that out. But by the end of the session, we know exactly why that lifetime was picked for them to see and how it relates to the current lifetime, which it always does. It's so amazing. And then when we get done looking at the lifetimes or the experiences, it can be so many different things. We just make this easy segue over to the high self. And that's where I start asking their questions, and we scan the body. We do healing of the body. They do healing. I'm just the tour guide. And that's where it just becomes so fascinating. And that high self part is a very unique aspect to the client. And oftentimes, doesn't even have the same personality as the client, which is just a hoot. It's just so much fun to watch that unfold in front of your eyes.
So what's your favorite part of the modality?
Oh my God, that's an impossible question. So I have like millions of parts. The first part that comes to mind when you ask that, so I'll go with that one, is that I get to talk with a lot of high selves. I get to ask a lot of questions. I like to interview like you do. So, if it's been through the crazy events over these past couple of years, or, asking about their perception of time and why it's different here, or asking about simultaneous lifetimes or parallel lives. I mean, there's nothing that's off topic. So you can just, kind of just be a big old geek with understanding our life and all that's out there.
Wow. What was Dolores Cannon like?
Oh my gosh, Dolores is, oh, it just gives me chills when you bring her up. I feel like Dolores is still here. She still pops into sessions often, and she's just always around. But in the physical, she was quite an interesting lady. She was a force to be reckoned with. When you sat in class, you did not goof around. She had a lot to deliver, and she would suffer no fools. So you paid attention. And but on the more personal side, I was very lucky because I almost right away started to assist her, which gave me that opportunity to get to know her better, sit in the back of her classroom, keep learning all the time. But on her very personal side, she was very funny. And my husband got to know her a bit, and they really seemed to like each other, and they would tease each other over who had the best meatloaf recipe. And, and I like kicking him under the table, like, let Dolores win, she's Dolores.
Oh man. Um, yeah, her story is interesting. It's just, like I'm just fascinated with the amount of content that she has out there. I mean, she has like 19 books or something like that, and then like endless YouTube and radio channels. Like it's fascinating.
Well, here, and I'll give you I don't know a lot about this, but I do believe her last book is getting ready to be published. It's been held for a while, and I've been lucky enough to read a couple of chapters of it, and it's unbelievably timely. Even though the material came through many, many, many years ago, she held on to it before her death because she didn't feel the world was ready for this information yet.
Wow.
And I think when it was 2018, her daughter Julie and I were teaching in Australia, and she was editing some of the material. So that's where I got to read it. And it was like, I can't believe how perfect this was for our time now.
Wow.
So I do believe that is in the works. And I would hope that this year yet, this one will be coming out.
Mhm. That's not like convoluted five, is it?
No, no, I will, well, gosh, I don't think the name has been changed. I think it's going to be called Horns of the Goddess.
Horns of the Goddess. Holy smokes.
And that might get changed. I don't have anything to do with that, but that's what it was last I knew.
Well, she spoke many times about the subconscious, where she gets her information. And this is not from the smaller subconscious, like what we think, right? Like when people traditionally take you into hypnosis, people think they talk to the subconscious to eliminate these, these traits that we don't want, these vices like smoking and drinking and whatever, eating, overeating. This subconscious she talks about is the higher self or the universe or what have you, right? Like, but this higher self comes up, like this information comes up from different people, right? Like, so like let's say you and I are in like two different sessions with Dolores Cannon. Like I would give her a part of a book, right? A chapter or something or information. And let's say like a month or 6 months down the road, she has a session with you independently, and then you're adding on to that section that I just gave her from your subconscious. Have you ever had anything like that happen to you?
Yes, matter of fact, I have. That brings up a really fun memory. Um, Several years ago, I had 3 sessions, 3 different clients. They didn't know each other. That probably in about the course of about 2 months, um, maybe less than that, just piggybacked from one person's information to the next person's information to the next person's information. And I can't remember which high self it was, like 2 or 3, said, we know that we're continuing this information from the other. So I mean, it's just really mind-boggling. We tend to think so limited,
Mhm.
in our life experience because that's what we do. But really, we truly are connected to all.
You have a book coming out, don't you?
I do, yeah.
What's that about?
Well, it's a little bit about my beginnings of trying to figure out this big world and how we all fit into it. And when talk began and what that was like, because that was not an expected experience whatsoever. So I had a lot to wrap my head around with that. And then this QHHT stuff, which, I feel like I just get to
Geek
be,
out
I
on some
guess
fun stuff, right? Like, I
it
mean, we're
is,
talking
yeah.
about, so how do you fact check it, right? Like, or can you fact check some of the information that comes to you?
It's sometimes you can. I mean, it's a wonky thing, that's fact checking, right? Because who's the fact
Sure.
checker, right?
Yeah.
And Dolores loved to say, you're going to go back in time with these sessions and you're going to hear history different than what you've learned it, because maybe you're getting it from the perspective of the person that was building the pyramid, or maybe you'll get a completely different story in history. And she loved to say that history is usually written by the winners, so it's skewed.
Mm, yeah.
Right. And so this book, so I'll tell you kind of a funny story about the title of this book. The title is The Greatness Incubator, which is a really funny thing because I was getting a a reading. This wonderful psychic, I was on the phone with her. She was really jamming it out. She was very connected and very good. And she says, she's talking about this book I'd be writing. And I'm like, yeah, I got a lot of material, but I don't know about writing a book. And she says, they're telling me it's like the greatness incubator. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that is. And then I got to thinking about it. I'm like, well, yeah, we're all greatness incubators. I mean, we all have it within us. We have all answers and all knowing within us. And I guess we're incubating it until we learn how to tap into it, which is all great and fine. But then I walked out to my mailbox at home, and there's like a big fat catalog in there. I'm like, okay, that's weird. But, and I pull it out, and it's a Uline catalog. And I'm like, Uline? Like, I don't know what Uline is. I mean, they're containers and boxes and things like that. And I'm like, what? And I look at the address because I'm thinking, well, it must be one of my neighbors, and the mailman put it in the wrong box. And it's addressed to the Greatness Incubator.
What?
And my address. Now, I've got a picture. I'll send it to you. I still have the catalog. And I'm like, what? The Greatness Incubator is, I think it's something like the manager of the Greatness Incubator or something like that. And I'm like, that's so weird.
That is amazing.
I know. So
It's
I've always
giving me
held it.
goosebumps just listening to that.
I know it. So I think, I think my purpose is to show people that they have this greatness within them.
I think you're a great interviewer, though. Like, I listened to some of your sessions.
Thank you.
Yes, the people that are having the experience of past life regression can be great describers of a scene, right? But it takes a great interviewer to pull that information out, and I feel like you do that. Like, I was listening to one of your YouTubes of the one that you sent me, right? Like, of the young lady who had some fantastic lives, right? I think she was a queen or something like that. But her descriptions, right? Like, you're leading her down that road of like describing and painting that picture, which, I mean, you have to be very, very in touch with the moment, right? Like, you have to guide them along the way. Like, you're not doing it for them. Like, that's tough, right? Like, all right. Because sometimes they give you short answers sometimes, and now you got to pry,
Yeah, we called it the pulling teeth session, but hopefully we don't get a lot of that. But the trick of it, I think, if there's a trick, is just asking very open-ended questions, because you want them to tell their story through their eyes, not your story through their eyes. And so, the best questions are tell me more, and what happens next. But it is a fun, kind of flying by the seat of your pants situation, because you don't know where they're going to go. You don't know what information they're going to throw at you. And you want to help them dive as deep as possible into their consciousness to gather as much information as they can, because we're recording it for them. And we want them to be able, I tell them, like, we're going to create the ultimate golden onion, and the more you can tell me, the better questions that I can ask, and the more layers of information we're going to get onto that recording for you to unpack later.
Sure.
So
What has been the because excuse me, you talk about healing there too, right? Have you ever seen like miracle healing take place in your sessions?
Oh, it's so normal.
It's so normal.
It's so normal. And let me explain to you why it's so normal. What Dolores found is that we are, our bodies are messengers. And so when we have something that's out of alignment, we're not on the right course, we need to make changes. Humans are really funny. We listen to pain. It's just a weird human thing. That's what catches our attention and will slow us down a little bit. And what she discovered is the body speaks a very literal language. And so when you can understand the message and make the connection of what needs to change, the symptom just leaves, because that's the symptom's job, is to deliver the message. Once the message is delivered, if we can make that change, there's no reason to hang on to it. And I don't care if it is a wonky knee, if it's stage 4 cancer, anything is possible. I've had clients that are in hospice that have healed themselves. So it's all possible, and it's not a magic wand. I mean, we break ourselves down. We're pretty dynamic in being able to do that. And we usually do it over periods of time and not even realize the thoughts, the beliefs, the experiences that have affected different parts of the body. So in a session, it's very eye-opening, because when we're talking about their life story, sometimes then they'll start to make the connections of, oh my gosh, like that's a pattern that I do, or I wonder if this event in my childhood really has stayed with me and shaped these decisions that I made that have, caused my body to break down. And then when we get into the session, in the most unexpected ways, it all comes back up. But that high self just knows how to guide each client in the way that they can receive the information. And when we get to the part of the healing, that's so fun, because what they're doing is they're telling themselves, it's not me doing any healing, it's not me answering any questions, it is all them. They tell themselves why they created their issue, because we all create our own stuff. We're not victims. We all do it ourselves. We just have to buck up and accept that. And then we created it. All we are is energy in these dense, unique forms. So in energy, we can heal it. We learn, or we find out what they learned from that situation, because we all learned from our issues. Watching the healing happening is sometimes very just simple and blasé, and yeah, it's done. And sometimes it's very detailed and amazing. Oh my gosh. And most importantly, what we find out for them is what needs to change after the session to help them maintain healing, because the symptoms are the messages. And if their old thoughts, beliefs, and experiences are what created the issue, if they leave the session, don't listen to the recording, and just go back to their old ways of thinking, doing, and being, then the neutral body goes, oh, we're not done with that experience, and it'll recreate the health issue.
Mhm.
But if they can take what they've given themselves in this session and say, yep, that's what I used to do, and that's how I got here. And now I've told myself this is what needs to change, and I'm going to make those changes. Then the neutral body goes, oh, okay, we're done with all that old stuff. Now we're going to do this, and it's going to be so much better. And that's how they maintain the healing. And so the recording is really important for that, because it's kind of reprogramming their brain from those old ways of thinking to the new.
Sure. Oh, and that's what level 3. Well, I guess there's 3 levels, and I guess you can do that on level 1, right? Like you can have
Oh
these
my gosh.
healings.
Level ones I love. They give the best sessions. The level 3 is just, it's a lot more experience, which is nice, as well. But I tell you what, we have, we call them level 1 interns. They're just beginning, and we want them to do at least 20 practice sessions for free or goodwill offerings, because the gift to them is the payment is having the experience. And those level 1 interns can give Dolores Cannon level sessions.
Let me ask
all
you this, right? So you have to do the intern, you have to give away or do 20 free sessions, right?
right.
And and it has to be in person, right? Because QHHT isn't done in person. I feel like if I'm the student and I'm looking around at my circle of friends and family, which it's a very small circle, by the way, I'm thinking to myself, I am surrounded by skeptics. Is this going to work? That's the first thing that pops in my mind, is like, can I do this?
Yes, you can do this, and it's not that hard. You have to kind of change your way of thinking a little bit, and stretch out a little bit. So sometimes family and friends are really great to work with, and sometimes they're the hardest ones, or they're just doing it because they're trying to help you out, and they can still have really mind-blowing sessions. You never know. But when I was first starting out, I liked working more with like friends of friends, because we didn't have that personal connection, and they would tend to open up more and easier, and they weren't as guarded. But I just put out there, I mean, I'm a big trust truster in the universe that, this is all going to play out, but I'm really big about action, so I got my word out that I was doing this, and I put it up on Facebook, and, that was 10 years ago. But I did group past life regressions at different little venues here in my town of Des Moines. And that got people understanding what I was doing, and then they wanted their own session. And I was pretty creative with that, and I found people are way more open to it than you think, and it wasn't that hard at all to get this done.
Wow, that's fascinating. How long does a session typically last?
There shouldn't be a time limit to it because everyone is unique and individual. I would say typically sessions go about 5 to 7 hours.
Mm-hmm. What's the longest you've ever done?
The longest? Oh,
yeah.
Gosh. Probably about 10 hours.
Wow. That's pretty in depth. I mean, I'm sure you're getting some juicy information.
Yeah, everybody's different, and sometimes it just, their life story takes a little bit longer, but it's really to tell your own life story to somebody who is unconditional and wanting you to get the very best from this experience is a gift. Because, we never sit down and say, well, this is the family I was born into, and go through the childhood until we get up to the current time. We never do that. And if we're talking about our life with family or friends, oftentimes they'll interrupt you and say, oh, you don't remember that, right? That never happened. And it's like, no, that is what I remember. And that is what happened. This is completely different. You just get to tell your story, and that can take a couple hours, and sometimes it's longer. And but it makes, however long they need it to be, makes the session, the actual hypnosis session, just so much deeper and beneficial.
I feel like the past lives aren't really past lives. I feel like it's just kind of like, because you say like the client is in the body, right? Or not in the body, they're in their body, right? But they're living that life. So I feel like it's all happening like all together, like it's meshing.
Right. Concurrent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the high selves love to talk about that. Every once in a while, you can get a really geeky high self that will go down that rabbit hole with you. And it's amazing. But yeah, it's kind of like, I'm getting ready to host this trip to Egypt. And so we're going to be helping people tap into their past lives and other knowings of consciousness in those times and places. And it's like thinking about that, think of a place in the world that you've always felt drawn to go to, or you'd like to go back to because you just feel so at home there. My pretty good guess is you've had a lifetime there, and even if there's somewhere you do not want to go to, like that just turns you off, you would never go there, you hate that place, there's no reason for you to, there's probably a connection there. And so, when they get into this nice deep state of relaxation, we're really accessing the right side of their brain, the part of them that knows everything. That's where we get our intuition, our gut, our knowing. That left side of the brain is where we do all of our analyzing, our pro and conning, and paralysis by analysis. That's where we carry worry and fear. But this right side doesn't do that. It loves us unconditionally, and it has all of our records. It knows everything about us, and is more easily connected to what we call collective consciousness, which is all knowing. So we want to go party over there on that right side. And that's where those other aspects of themselves or lifetimes reside.
What is the collective conscious, that subconscious that Dolores was talking about?
Yes. So let me tell you why Dolores called it the subconscious. It's kind of a cute little story. So Dolores was doing different types of hypnosis. This QHHT wasn't just like instantly her thing. That took a long time for her to hone. So she was doing past life regression, and during one of these sessions, this information started coming through, and they actually started scanning her body, and she says she could feel the scan going down her body physically. And the client was speaking kind of in a robotic voice, which can happen. And they said, you are the one, you are the one, you are the one we will be giving information to. And that's how it began.
Mm.
And so she didn't know what she was talking to. And in her mind, she called it the subconscious because it was information below the surface that we usually tap into.
Mm.
Now, we would get doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists in the classes, and they would want to, argue with her that is not the definition of the subconscious. And she'd say, that's my definition of the subconscious.
I can just see it now, like a psychologist going toe to toe with Dolores Cannon. And I've seen
Oh,
some of her interviews, and she's not afraid to be like, turn the phone off, turn your cell phone off. Like, she's done it. Like, I've listened to her. She's just like, it's
I'll tell you,
fascinating.
when I was at my level 1 class, now I was the one that would usually sit in the front row because I want to absorb as much as I can. But for some reason with Dolores, I just thought, I don't know about this all. And I sat in the second row, so a little bit more reserved.
Sure.
And the second day of class, we're all sitting together in the row each day. So we got to know each other. And the second day of class, somebody raised their hand and asked a question. And I think I was looking down, I was listening, but doing something else. And you hear this booming voice of Dolores, and she goes, I answered that yesterday. Where were you yesterday? And we're like, oh man, you just made grandma mad. And from that moment on, for the rest of the week, if one of us in our row had a question to ask, we would take a poll down the row. Did she answer this yet? Did she answer this yet? Because nobody wanted to be that one. So you paid attention because
Sure.
she had a lot that she wanted to share, and she didn't want to waste time.
Yeah, and you better not be turning on that air conditioner unit either, because any type of feedback, she would get on you. Like, there's been 4 or 5 different recordings that I've listened to, and I guess the hotel staff are going back to adjust the air, and she'd immediately stop.
She was almost deaf, actually, so she had hearing aids in. Isn't that amazing? So things like that would affect her.
Wow, I didn't know that.
She really read lips. It's just amazing.
That's incredible. Yeah, her story is amazing. I can see why so many people are just attracted to that modality. And I mean, who doesn't want it? Like, hers is just really, it really attracted me because of the in-depth conversation with the higher self, right? Like, learning information, the forgotten information, right? Of what, whatever this is. And just to be able to tap into that and experience that. I haven't had one yet, right? I want to, I'm going to, but it's just fascinating to me that, this is out there and it can help people, especially with healing. That's so important to me, and it's not like you're the person healing the client. It's the client healing themselves. That's how it's so powerful for me, because it's like they're doing it for themselves. And so now we can see the power behind the mind,
Yes.
I can't even add on to that. It's just so beautiful. What was the first miracle healing that you saw take place in front of you? Like, something that you talk about hospice, right? Like, something that you, maybe one of your first healings where you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. I really hope this works, but then it works. Talk about that experience.
Okay. Well, okay. Oh gosh, I got so many examples popping into my head, but let me tell you about a session that I thought went wonky and sideways first. And then we got the rest of the story at a second session. So when normally it's just one session, everybody just needs one session. They've got it. The recording helps keep more information coming in. It's so beautiful. But I was brand new to this, and I had a lady come in who had been at one of my group regressions, and she had MS. She could still walk, but not well. And she didn't have a cane. She had a staff. She was like Moses walking into my office. And we both had very high expectations of her healing this MS. She mostly just sat in a chair all day because she wasn't that mobile. And she told me her life story. And I am telling you, Trey, it was one tragedy upon a tragedy upon a tragedy. And at some point, I looked at her and I said, I'm surprised you can tell me all of this without crying. You know, this is so much to go through. And she says, well, this is how I do this. This is how I get through my day. I mean, she's like reading a recipe to me. It was that detached. And we get ready to start her session, and it's just it's like one of the great wrestling matches between the conscious mind and the subconscious. And we tried and tried and tried and tried for about 2 hours, and she just wasn't letting herself go. So we ended that session. I counted her up, and we're both just so bummed because we had such high expectations for the day. And she said she needed to use the restroom, and we had talked about, you know, she'd come back in about 3 weeks and we could try again. And she went to the restroom, she came back, and she goes, well, this is really weird because nothing happened here, but I noticed that I have this rash over my heart, and that's weird. I didn't have that when I came in. And I said, well, that's interesting. You know, I think a rash would be indicative of, you know, all the pain that you've gone through, and maybe that's just coming to the surface, and I don't know, but we'll find out next time. And she goes, well, the other weird thing is my back feels better, and that's weird because my back always hurts. And I said, well, let's, you know, be grateful for that, and we'll figure it out when you come back in. So off she went. She came back 3 weeks, and she goes, okay, this is so weird. She says, I really know nothing happened at that first session, but when I woke up the next morning, I was pain-free. And she says, I haven't been pain-free in decades. I tried to give credit to anything but that session because nothing happened, but that's the only thing I did different. And I probably wouldn't even have come back in, except for I kind of threw my back out yesterday at work. And I thought, well, I might as well go in and try again since I've got the time booked. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. That's really interesting. So where she had fought it so hard the first time, the second time she goes in like Flynn, and she has this beautiful reunion with her teenage son who had been murdered. And she could see where he's at, and that he's at peace and he's happy. And it was great healing of her heart that she had been carrying such weight on. When her high cell came in, it was like a flipping rock star, and it was going through the whole body, and it was, you know, telling me what it was doing and, you know, why things were the way they were. And at some point I said, hey, where were you last time? We could have used you last time. And it said, oh, hey, Suzanne, it's not about you. And at first I was like, oh, that's kind of rude. And then I'm like, oh, thank goodness. You know? And it says, let us tell you why this has happened this way. When she came in the first time, she had read Dolores's books, and she knew other people had healed themselves, but at that time, she did not feel worthy of healing herself. And underneath that concept of her thinking, if we would have come in the first time and healed it all, she wouldn't have accepted it, and nothing would have stuck. She would have gone back to all of her old ways. So we decided to work with her a different way. We knew you'd give her another opportunity to come in, and we decided to take all the pain away from her and let her sit with that for a little bit. And trust us, she did not think it was the session. She tried to give credit to everything but that session. But in the end, she knew that was the only thing that had happened. So now she's ready, and we can go in and we're going to repair these nerves. And, you know, this is what she needs to do going forward to maintain this, but she's ready for it now. So that was,
Wow.
that was a mind blower.
That is a mind blower. Have you ever had, like, and I hate to bring this up, like after that's such great, amazing story, but have you ever had like negative energies like come through?
You know, that is a really interesting concept. It's a great question to ask. Dolores had a philosophy on that, and I'd have to say I back it up from what I've seen in sessions, is that negative energy, I mean, we're all everything, right? And so when people come in and they wonder, you know, do I have a curse or do I have something attached to me? When you get them into that really deep space of their high self, it so often is explained as a part of themselves that they don't feel comfortable dealing with or looking at. So it's more comfortable to make themselves the victim and have something outside of them attacking them, right? So if you can kind of understand it from that perspective, and you get deeper than what that belief of that dark energy is, or that attachment is, it really describes itself. That I had a client years ago. He was one of the 3 that I told you about that had concurring similar information for me. So he came into a session, and he was just a super nice accountant from the north. He was awesome. But he says, I've got this attachment on my throat, and I can feel it. It's kind of acting up right now, and it's kind of, it's a little dramatic for this accountant. And I said, okay, that's cool. We'll find out what it is. Don't worry about it. And so he goes under, and what he finds is that his true purpose in this life is to speak amongst the masses. He's here to deliver information. And this accountant sitting behind the desk of his dad's accounting firm, isn't really in the position to do that. And he's fighting himself. So this attachment was his own fear, and he was trying to suppress it. Mm-hmm. And once we found that out, this is kind of funny. Sometimes in sessions, the client will pop up a little bit to add their color commentary. It's kind of fun. And he did that. And he says, oh my God. He goes, it's just me. I just need to love that part of me. And then he went back in, and the high self came back in again. And, it's this beautiful self-realization about that. So that would be a typical response to that.
Is he out speaking to the masses now?
I don't know. I hope so. He's so lovely.
It's me. I was the accountant.
Yes. I hope he has a podcast somewhere.
Have you ever taken someone back to the original source, to God?
Oh, yeah, I have. Yeah. I mean, I don't take them back. They take themselves there.
Sure.
And then I just ask the questions, but
well, I guess, yeah. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes.
And what's that like?
It is the bomb, that's
it's
like
the bomb.
It is. Because they're like, they're like all at one, and they usually get very emotional because they feel like they're home. That I had one just this week that was like that. And that's such a beautiful place to experience. And, you can ask all sorts of questions about, what it's like to be there, and how they can remember what it's like now that they've visited it again. I usually go into interview mode with Source, and, about all this stuff going on, what do you think about it from your perspective? We can get some really interesting information.
So is this before? So if you take them back to the beginning, right? Or I shouldn't say that. If they take themselves back to the beginning, is that when Source separated itself into individuated units of consciousness?
Yes, and it's all happening at once. So
it's all happening now.
It's all happening now. And I think we go back and forth. I think especially in our dream times, we're doing many different things. And we have to kind of not think in a linear fashion with this work. It helps explain it a little bit better. Although, linear is fine too.
Sure. What kind of messages does the Source have, like when you're asking these questions?
You are loved. We're all one. There's nothing to worry about. Everything's okay. It's really the don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff.
But it doesn't seem like small stuff, does it? I mean, we're here.
It depends on our perspective, right? I mean, we can get really whipped up into fear, and so this is what's so cool about these times. Oh my gosh, I don't want to take too much time telling you this whole story, but so in this work that I've done with QHHT, it's been a very interesting observation of where humanity is at in evolution, right? With our connections to that we know everything, or that everything is fearful and we have to be scared. So in 10 years ago and earlier in this work, it was very common for people to have what we called amnesia experience. They didn't remember their sessions. They didn't know what was going on during the session. They just kind of checked out, went down the hall around the corner and sat down for a while. It's how it kind of appeared. And then about 10 years ago, which is when I started, the clients started acting just a little bit differently. They were still going to these amazing other lifetimes. They were still answering all their questions, doing all their healing. All of that staying consistent over all these decades in time. But what was different was they were starting to remember more after the session. They would say that they felt more aware in the sessions. Sometimes their left brain would pop up a little bit with the fear of, I think I'm not in deep enough. I think I'm making this up, where we didn't have that left and right brain argument going before when they had that amnesia. And it was challenging because we didn't understand what was going on. Even Dolores was perplexed. This was around 2012 when this started happening pretty regularly. Now, what we know 10 years later in all these conversations with the high self, they say, no, this is part of our evolution. Back in the day when we had amnesia experience, that was to help us start waking up, help us start understanding that we hold all this knowledge and ability to heal ourselves within. Back then, we really believed in this concept that we've been fed. I'm going to call them by the controllers. We know who those dumb guys are, that have wanted to keep us separate from this knowing that we carry all this information. And so this concept that they fed us that we dove into was, if you're making something up, it's not real. Mm-hmm. But what we know is our imagination and our creativity are the two greatest gifts that we come into a life with. It is our direct connect to source. But we're not taught that. And if we're not taught that, then we stay over in fear and worry and confusion, and we rely on others to answer our problems for us. It's been a really good run they've had with this concept. So back in the time when I started, when people were starting to feel somewhat aware in sessions, what the high selves tell me about that time period was we were learning to come out of that amnesia so that we could feel what it's like to tap into this higher knowledge that we carry. And the goal is to get to the place where we're like our high self in an awake and aware physical body. We could be eating pizza and understanding that we had, this really amazing lifetime in Italy. And, because we'll have that knowledge, you won't need a session to access that. You'll be able to have it and know it. And so we're like that close from that step. And these 10 years of feeling awake and aware during the sessions, and that's been a progressive thing that we see in clients, is getting us to this point. And the beautiful part of where we're at with this is I'm seeing clients, I'm hearing from clients after sessions now, not all the time, but frequently, that they're able to tap into that high self. And if they have a problem, they just quiet their mind down, take a few breaths, ask, what do I need to do about this? And that knowledge or that voice, or that awareness is known and trusted because they've had the session and they have the recording and they're in that vibration and frequency. And so they are acting as their high self in an awake and aware physical body. So that's been a joy to kind of map out and understand deeply. And those are like the questions that I love to ask the high self about when I have a little Q&A time with them.
Oh, man. So what's the difference? Like, why is, and some people might not understand, but why is it that QHHT has to be done in person? Is that because of the connection with the person in the room and that being physically close to them helps them through that guidance?
Yeah, that is a great question. Even when I took the class back in 2012, I think that's when all we really had was Skype, right? It's the big new thing. And so there were questions about that. Why can we do this in Skype? We could reach so many more people and it'd be so great. And Dolores was really adamant about that. She did not want these sessions to be done in anything other than in person. And her reasons for that were a few. And this is, I'm going to take her reasons and I'm going to put it into real world experience here. When you are one-on-one with somebody, you're sharing energy with them, and they're feeling this intimate exchange of trust. There is something different when you do this on a screen. I mean, you still have that connection, but I'm going to tell you, it just is so much better when it's in person. And then you have, the possibility of technology going down, and, nobody would get hurt by that, but you could get feeling really, discombobulated, and that wouldn't be beneficial for the client in any way, shape, or form. So we really, I mean, trust me, this was debated, especially when the pandemic started, because, I couldn't work in my building for about 2 months, and, other people were longer. And we really, really, really debated with that, up with Julia on this. And we really came to the conclusion that, in order to serve people in their highest and best way, to have the most pure session possible and the best beneficial outcome, it needed to stay in person.
Mm.
And I'm sure there's practitioners that do it online, but I would never recommend that.
Wow. Well, I do agree with the human connection part, and sharing that energy and having, I think it definitely makes the moment and the that experience more meaningful for both the practitioner and the client. So I
Well,
definitely agree
and
with
there's
that.
also for the practitioner, there's little tiny things that we are watching for on the client's face and the body, to get a good sense of where they're at when they're under. And on a screen, it's hard to really navigate that properly. And sometimes clients have to get up and use the restroom in the midst of it, or
Mhm.
a few might have to throw up. It
Mhm.
just anything can happen.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
it's just best to hold space with them, and they will always get a better end result with that.
Awesome. Suzanne, this has been the quickest hour of my life. How can people find out more about you? Where can they go to? I don't know if you have a waiting list for clients, but where can they reserve a session with you?
Yep, the list is about 2 years right now.
Holy smokes.
But it goes fast, and there's practitioners all over the world. My website is suzannespooner.com, and you can book a session on the website. You can learn the art of universal knowing, or talk, or channeling. You can talk to your own high self that way. I have a free, great meditation that I did a few years ago to purposefully to help people tap into their high selves by themselves. I mean, I'm all about this. Like, I know we can all do this and get our own answers. So all of that is at suzannespooner.com. And then practitioners are all over the world. And you can look for those people in your area by going to QHHTofficial.com.
What do you want to tell people right now about QHHT? Like, what is the one thing that people need to know about it?
Just that it's anybody can be hypnotized. It's really just being guided into a deep form of relaxation. And all answers are within you, and all ability to heal yourself is within you. And there's a great story residing within you that will help you understand your life. And sorry about that. I'm downtown in Des Moines, so we get a little of that.
Look crazy down there.
Yeah, we're pretty crazy here in Des Moines, let me tell you.
I thought the lights went out at 9 o'clock.
I know, they just about do. So when people come in for a session, this is how I'll leave this. There's just seems to be this collective, I don't get it. Like, I'm a good person, but then this happens, and I try so hard, but then that happens, and my childhood and my partner or the people I work with do this and this and that, and I just don't get it. And when I count them up at the end, they just have this beautiful Godsmack look of, oh my gosh, I understand it now. And it's one of the most beautiful transformations you can make in a day. I mean, it's the best day of your life. Why not do it?
Last question, right? Have you ever had like a huge skeptic like turn believer on you?
Yes. Okay. So, oh my gosh, we're going to go into overtime with this. Is that okay? A little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, So I get a lot of couples for some reason. I guess I attract that. And usually one of them is really into Dolores and totally gets it, and one's being drugged here, and so it's usually the ones that get drugged that have the best sessions. But I had one lady, the husband was really into it. She just was like, whatever. And so I'm trying to explain this to her, because she's not into any of this stuff. So I'm just trying to change how I deliver this information. I'm just getting this look of lost on her face. And I finally said, do you understand what I'm saying? Are you okay with this? And she goes, well, I just want you to know that I think it's all BS. And I said, okay, well, thanks for your honesty. And, do you want to keep doing this? We don't have to do this. This is totally up to you. And she's like, no, he'll be really mad at me if I don't do it. So let's just get this over with. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. And so we start on her session, and it's a little bit of a tug of war between the left and the right side. And I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of like, wow, I don't know what else to ask. This is getting a little challenging. And I ask, I help her a little bit. And then I say, okay, now what do you see? And I'm just, hoping for anything. And she goes, well, a lot of planets and stars. And I'm like, yes. And I'm like, tell me more. And she's like, well, I'm on a spaceship. I'm like, oh, okay, tell me about your spaceship. Well, we have to go down to this planet, and we got to see what's growing down there and how things are going. And she progresses till she's on the planet. And I'm like, well, how are you gathering this information? And Trey, she's laying on the table and her eyes are closed. And she looks like I'm like the biggest idiot. And she goes, with a T-track device. I'm sorry, I haven't heard of a T-track device. Can you explain that to me? And she was like, yeah, and so anyways, the whole session was just amazing. And she opened her eyes up at the very end after I counted her out, and she's like, that blew my mind. I'm like, I know, see, you have this within you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So it's all possible.
Sign up today. Suzanne Spooner, thank you so much for joining this show. Thank you for sharing your stories, your experiences, and sharing your time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Trey, for what you're doing, because it helps the collective, and you're amazing. And I do hope you take this journey someday. And I would love to be your practitioner, but I know we're far away. But so find somebody good by you and go for it.